The sun was setting over the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oak Ridge, Virginia. The sky turned shades of orange and pink as families began to settle in for the evening. It was a peaceful place, where people knew their neighbors and crime was rare. But tonight that peace would be shattered. Officer Ryan Carter sat in his patrol car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His jaw was clenched and his eyes scanned the streets with suspicion. Ryan had been on the force for 10 years, but he wasn't well liked by many. He had a reputation for being abrasive, quick to anger, and often dismissive of anyone who didn't look like him. Complaints about his behavior had piled up over the years, but nothing stuck. Some said it was because of his uncle, a high-ranking official in the department, while others believed it was simply easier to ignore the problem than deal with it. Tonight, Ryan was patrolling alone. Dispatch had received an anonymous tip about suspicious activity near an old warehouse on the edge of town. The caller claimed they saw someone sneaking around the building after dark. To most officers, this would have sounded like a routine check, a bored teenager or maybe a homeless person looking for shelter. But to Ryan, it sounded like trouble. As he drove toward the location, his mind raced with assumptions. Probably some druggie, he muttered under his breath. Or worse, one of those illegal immigrants trying to hide out. His thoughts were clouded with prejudice, fueled by years of unchecked bias. He didn't bother questioning why he thought this way. It was just how things were in his world. When Ryan arrived at the warehouse, he parked his car a short distance away and stepped out quietly. The air was cool, and the only sounds came from crickets chirping in the nearby bushes. He adjusted his belt, making sure his flashlight and gun were within easy reach. Then he moved cautiously toward the building. The warehouse was old and abandoned, its windows boarded up and walls covered in graffiti. Weeds grew through cracks in the pavement, and the faint smell of rust and decay lingered in the air. As Ryan rounded the corner, he froze. There she was, a young woman standing near the entrance holding what looked like a small flashlight. She wore jeans, a plain t-shirt, and sneakers, her dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She seemed completely at ease, scanning the area as if searching for something. Ryan's heart pounded. "Hey, you there!" he called out, his voice sharp and commanding. The woman turned slowly, her expression calm but alert. Her name was Elena Martinez, though Ryan didn't know that yet. What he saw was someone who didn't belong here, someone who fit all the stereotypes he'd built up in his head. "Can I help you?" Elena asked, her tone polite but firm. She didn't seem afraid, which only irritated Ryan further. In his experience, people should be scared when confronted by a police officer. They should stammer, apologize, or at least show some sign of guilt. But not her. She stood tall, meeting his gaze without flinching. "What are you doing here?" Ryan demanded, taking a step closer. His hand hovered near his holster, ready to draw his weapon if needed. "This is private property." "I'm just checking something," Elena replied evenly. "Is there a problem?" "A problem?" "Of course there's a problem," Ryan snapped. His face flushed red, and his voice rose louder with each word. "You're trespassing. Do you even speak English?" Elena blinked, taken aback by the sudden hostility. "I do," she said calmly. "And I'm not trespassing. I have permission to be here." "Permission?" Ryan scoffed. "From who? The rats living in this dump?" Before Elena could respond, Ryan pulled out his gun and pointed it directly at her. "Don't move," he barked. "Put your hands where I can see them." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Elena raised her hands slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. Inside, her mind was racing. She hadn't expected this kind of reaction. She wasn't just a random civilian. She was a highly trained CIA operative gathering intelligence on a suspected arms deal happening later that week. This warehouse was supposed to be empty, and she had chosen this time specifically to avoid drawing attention. But now, thanks to this trigger-happy cop, everything was spiraling out of control. Ryan took another step forward, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. "Who sent you?" he demanded. "Are you working with someone? Tell me the truth." "I already told you." Elena said, keeping her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I'm not doing anything wrong. You expect me to believe that? Ryan sneered. His grip tightened on the gun as he glared at her. People like you always lie. Elena frowned. People like me? Ryan ignored the question. Instead, he pressed harder. Where are your papers, your ID? Let's see them. Elena hesitated. She couldn't exactly whip out her CIA badge and explain what she was really doing here. Doing so would blow her cover and jeopardize months of work. But she also knew she couldn't let this escalate further. Slowly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a fake driver's license. Here, she said, holding it out for him to see. Ryan snatched it from her hand, squinting at the details. Martinez, he read aloud, his lip curling. Figures. Before he could say more, the sound of approaching sirens broke the tension. Backup had arrived, responding to the call Ryan had made earlier. 2 patrol cars screeched to a halt nearby, and several officers spilled out, weapons drawn. One of them, a younger man named Kevin, recognized the situation immediately. Ryan, stand down, he shouted. What's going on here? Ryan lowered his gun reluctantly, though his glare remained fixed on Elena. I caught her trespassing, he growled. She's hiding something. Kevin exchanged a glance with his partner, then turned to Elena. Ma'am, can you explain what you're doing here? Elena nodded. I'm conducting research for a project, she lied smoothly. I have permission from the owner of the property. Kevin raised an eyebrow. Do you have proof of that? Yes, Elena replied, pulling out a forged document from her bag. It's all right here. While Kevin reviewed the paperwork, Ryan paced back and forth, muttering under his breath. He was furious, not just because Elena had managed to talk her way out of trouble, but because she hadn't shown an ounce of fear. People like her weren't supposed to act like that. They were supposed to cower, to beg for mercy, not stand there looking him straight in the eye like equals. Eventually, Kevin handed the document back to Elena. Looks legit, he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. But I'll need to verify it with the property owner. Until then, we're going to have to ask you to leave. That's fine, Elena said, slipping the paper back into her bag. I've got what I needed anyway. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Ryan seething behind her. As the officers packed up and prepared to leave, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that he'd been played. Something about Elena Martinez didn't add up, and he was determined to find out what it was. Little did he know, his actions that night would set off a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. The next morning, the quiet suburban neighborhood of Oak Ridge was buzzing with chatter. News of the incident at the warehouse had spread like wildfire, thanks to a grainy but damning video posted online. Someone, a neighbor or passerby, had captured the confrontation between Officer Ryan Carter and Elena Martinez on their phone. The clip showed Ryan shouting racial slurs at Elena, pointing his gun at her, and refusing to listen as she calmly explained herself. It wasn't long before the footage went viral, sparking outrage across social media. By midday, local news stations picked up the story, running headlines that painted Ryan in an unflattering light. Racist cop points gun at innocent woman, one read. Another declared, officers' actions spark calls for justice. Comment sections exploded with angry posts from viewers demanding accountability. Some shared personal stories of similar encounters with law enforcement, while others called for systemic change. The video became a rallying cry against police misconduct and prejudice. Meanwhile, Elena returned to her apartment in Arlington, Virginia. She lived in a modest 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor of a brick building. To anyone who didn't know better, she appeared to be just another young professional working a 9-to-5 job. But behind closed doors, Elena led a double life as a CIA operative. After the incident at the warehouse, she spent the night reviewing her notes and ensuring no evidence tied her to the agency. By morning, she was ready to report back to Langley. At CIA headquarters, Director Alan Hayes sat behind his desk, scrolling through the same viral video everyone else was talking about. A tall man in his late 50s with graying hair and sharp eyes, Hayes had seen it all during his decades-long career. Yet even he couldn't ignore the implications of this particular incident. When Elena knocked on his office door, he waved her in without looking up. "Sit down," Hayes said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His tone was calm but serious. "Tell me what happened." Elena took a deep breath and recounted the events of the previous night. She described how Ryan had approached her aggressively, pointed his weapon, and made derogatory remarks based on her appearance. She also mentioned the arrival of backup officers and how she managed to defuse the situation using forged documents. Hayes listened intently, nodding occasionally. When Elena finished, he leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. "You handled yourself well," he said finally. "But this complicates things." "How so?" Elena asked, though she already suspected the answer. "This kind of attention could jeopardize your cover," Hayes explained. "If word gets out that you're CIA, it'll blow everything we've been working toward. We need to keep you out of the spotlight." Elena nodded. "I agree, but what about him?" She gestured toward the laptop screen still displaying the video. "He can't just get away with this." Hayes sighed. "Unfortunately, that's not our jurisdiction. Local authorities will handle it. Our priority is the mission. If we step in now, it'll only draw more scrutiny." Elena frowned but didn't argue. She trusted Hayes's judgment even if she didn't like it. Still, something about the situation gnawed at her. Ryan's behavior wasn't just reckless. It was part of a larger pattern. Officers like him didn't act alone. They were often enabled by those higher up. And given the sensitive nature of her assignment, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone might have tipped him off about her presence at the warehouse. Back in Oak Ridge, Ryan's world was unraveling. He woke up to a barrage of missed calls and text messages from colleagues and acquaintances. Most were supportive, urging him to stay strong and fight back against the cancel culture mob. Others were less sympathetic, calling him out for his actions. One message stood out, a curt email from Internal Affairs summoning him to a disciplinary hearing later that week. Ryan deleted the email without responding. Instead, he turned on the TV, flipping through channels until he found a news segment covering the incident. The anchor spoke in measured tones, describing the growing public outcry and calls for his termination. Ryan clenched his fists, his face reddening with anger. How dare they? He was just doing his job, protecting the community from people who didn't belong. Why couldn't anyone see that? His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Reluctantly, he got up and answered it, only to find Chief Gregory Miller standing on his porch. Miller was a burly man in his early 60s with a stern expression and a reputation for being tough but fair. At least that's how he liked to present himself publicly. Privately, he had ties to some unsavory characters, connections Ryan knew nothing about. "Can I come in?" Miller asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. He glanced around the living room, taking in the cluttered coffee table and empty beer bottles scattered across the floor. "Looks like you've had a rough night." "You think?" Ryan snapped, slamming the door shut. "Did you see what they're saying about me? They're trying to ruin my life." Miller held up a hand. "Calm down. Panicking won't help." "Easy for you to say," Ryan muttered. "You're not the one getting crucified online." Miller ignored the comment. "Listen carefully, Ryan. This isn't just about you anymore. There are bigger stakes here. You need to lay low and let us handle this." "What do you mean, us?" Ryan asked suspiciously. "What are you planning?" "That's not your concern," Miller replied sharply. "Your job is to stay quiet and follow orders. Do you understand?" Ryan hesitated but eventually nodded. Despite his bravado, he knew better than to cross Miller. The chief had always looked out for him, smoothing over past incidents and shielding him from consequences. If Miller said to keep his mouth shut, Ryan would comply. For now. As Miller left, Ryan sank onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. He felt trapped, betrayed by the very system he'd sworn to serve. The public hated him, his colleagues were distancing themselves, and even his superiors seemed eager to throw him under the bus. But beneath the self-pity, A darker emotion simmered: resentment. Resentment toward Elena Martinez, the woman who had humiliated him and exposed his flaws for the world to see. She thought she was clever, walking away unscathed while he bore the brunt of the fallout. Well, she wouldn't get away with it, not if he had anything to say about it. Unbeknownst to Ryan, Elena was already several steps ahead. Back at Langley, she met with Daniel Cruz, another agent assigned to assist her on the mission. Daniel was younger than Elena, with short dark hair and a quick wit. He had a knack for blending into crowds and gathering intel unnoticed, making him an invaluable asset to the team. "We need to dig deeper," Elena said as they reviewed surveillance photos of the warehouse and its surroundings. "There's no way Ryan acted on his own. Someone must have tipped him off." Daniel nodded. "Agreed. But who? And why?" "That's what we need to find out," Elena replied. "Start by looking into his recent communications. Phone records, emails, anything that might connect him to someone involved in the arms deal." "Got it," Daniel said, jotting down notes. "What about the chief? Could he be involved?" "It's possible," Elena admitted. "He's been on the force for decades. If there's corruption, he'd know about it, or be part of it." They spent the rest of the afternoon poring over data, piecing together fragments of information. By evening, they had uncovered a few leads. One name kept popping up: Gregory Miller. According to internal reports, Miller had received multiple complaints about misconduct within his department, yet none had resulted in significant action. More troubling was a series of encrypted messages exchanged between Miller and unknown recipients, hinting at shady dealings. Elena shared her findings with Hayes, who listened silently before offering his assessment. "This goes deeper than we thought," he said gravely. "If Miller is dirty, he's not working alone. We need to tread carefully." "I agree," Elena said, "but we can't afford to wait. The arms deal is happening soon. If we don't act fast, we risk losing everything." Hayes nodded. "Then it's settled. Keep digging, but stay vigilant. People like Miller don't play fair." As Elena left the office, she couldn't shake the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. This mission was more than just a job. It was a chance to expose the rot festering within institutions meant to protect society. But with every new discovery came fresh challenges, forcing her to question whom she could trust. One thing was certain: the road ahead would be fraught with danger, and failure was not an option. The investigation into Chief Gregory Miller and his connections deepened as Elena Martinez and Daniel Cruz worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. They spent hours in a dimly lit room at Langley, surrounded by files, photos, and computer screens displaying streams of data. The air was thick with tension, but neither of them complained. They knew the stakes were high, and time was running out. Elena began by focusing on Miller's phone records. She sifted through countless calls and texts looking for anything unusual. It wasn't long before she noticed a pattern. Several encrypted messages had been sent to an unknown number over the past few weeks. The timing of these messages matched key moments leading up to the arms deal Elena was investigating. Whoever Miller was communicating with seemed to be feeding him information or perhaps orders. Daniel, meanwhile, dug into Miller's financial records. At first glance, everything appeared normal. His salary matched his position, and there were no glaring red flags. But when Daniel examined smaller transactions, cash withdrawals, wire transfers, and payments labeled as consulting fees, a different picture emerged. Large sums of money were being funneled through shell companies and offshore accounts. It was clear that Miller was involved in something illegal, but proving it would require more concrete evidence. As they worked, Elena couldn't help but think about Ryan Carter. Despite his flaws, he was just a pawn in a much larger game. Someone, like Miller, had likely manipulated him, using his prejudices to justify reckless behavior. Ryan's actions at the warehouse weren't random. They were calculated, designed to intimidate or eliminate anyone who might interfere with their plans. Elena felt a pang of sympathy for him, though she quickly pushed it aside. Sympathy wouldn't change the facts. What mattered now was exposing the truth. Their breakthrough came late one night when Daniel discovered a link between Miller and a local crime syndicate. The syndicate, known as the Iron Claw, operated under the radar, dealing in weapons, drugs, and human trafficking. For years, they had evaded law enforcement thanks to their network of corrupt officials. Among those officials was Miller, who provided them with inside information and protection in exchange for a cut of their profits. "This is it," Daniel said, pointing to a document on his screen. "Look at this ledger. It lists payments made to someone with Miller's initials, and here, this memo mentions the warehouse." Elena leaned closer, her eyes scanning the details. "If this is real, it proves Miller tipped off Ryan about me. He must have thought I was a threat to the arms deal." "But why take such a risk?" Daniel asked. "Why send someone like Ryan instead of handling it himself?" "Because he wanted plausible deniability," Elena replied. "If things went wrong, he could blame Ryan and walk away clean. That's how people like Miller operate." With this new information, Elena knew they needed to act fast. The arms deal was scheduled to take place in less than a week, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. She updated Director Alan Hayes, who immediately authorized a covert operation to gather more evidence against Miller and the Iron Claw. Their goal was simple: infiltrate the syndicate, expose its leaders, and dismantle the entire operation. To do this, Elena and Daniel devised a plan. Elena would pose as a freelance journalist interested in writing an expose on organized crime in Virginia. Her cover story would allow her to get close to members of the Iron Claw without raising suspicion. Meanwhile, Daniel would monitor her movements from a safe distance, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Before putting the plan into motion, Elena met with Hayes one last time. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his tone serious. "It's dangerous if they find out who you really are." "They won't," Elena interrupted firmly. "I've done this before. I can handle it." Hayes studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Just remember, you're not alone. We'll have your back every step of the way." Elena left the office feeling a mix of determination and unease. She trusted Hayes and Daniel, but she also knew the risks. One wrong move could blow her cover and cost her life. Back in Oak Ridge, Ryan Carter was spiraling further into despair. Suspended from duty pending investigation, he spent most of his days drinking and watching TV. The weight of public scrutiny bore down on him, and he struggled to see a way out. Calls from friends and family dwindled, leaving him isolated and bitter. One evening, as he sat alone in his living room, his phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Meet me at Joe's Diner tomorrow night. Come alone." Ryan stared at the screen, unsure whether to ignore it or respond. Curiosity got the better of him, and he typed a single word: "Why?" The reply came almost instantly: "Because you want answers." Ryan hesitated, but eventually agreed. He didn't trust whoever was behind the message, but desperation drove him forward. Maybe this person could help him clear his name, or at least point him toward someone who could. The next night, Ryan arrived at Joe's Diner, a small, run-down establishment on the outskirts of town. The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a black sedan parked near the entrance. As he stepped inside, he spotted a man sitting in a booth near the back. The man wore a dark suit and sunglasses, his face obscured by shadows. "You're Ryan Carter?" the man asked as Ryan approached. "That's me," Ryan replied cautiously. "Who are you?" "Someone who can help you," the man said, gesturing for Ryan to sit. "But first, tell me what happened at the warehouse." Ryan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "I caught some trespasser snooping around. Thought she was up to no good." "And did you check her credentials?" the man pressed. "She showed me some papers," Ryan admitted. "But I don't think they were legit," the man smirked. "Smart girl. She's smarter than you realize." "What's that supposed to mean?" Ryan demanded. "It means you were played," the man said bluntly. "That woman you confronted? She's not who she says she is." Ryan's heart raced. "Who is she then?" "That's classified," the man replied. "But let's just say she works for people who don't take kindly to interference. Your boss, Miller, he set you up. Used you as a distraction while he covered his tracks." Ryan's mind reeled. Could it be true? Had Miller betrayed him? Before he could ask more questions, the man slid a folder across the table. Here's what you need to know. Use it wisely. Ryan opened the folder and found a stack of documents detailing Miller's dealings with the Iron Claw. There were photos, bank statements, and even transcripts of conversations. It was enough to bring Miller down, if Ryan chose to use it. "Why are you giving this to me?" Ryan asked suspiciously. "Let's just say we have mutual interests," the man said, standing up. "Good luck, Officer Carter. You're going to need it." With that, the man walked out of the diner, leaving Ryan alone with the folder. He stared at the documents, his mind racing with possibilities. For the first time in days, he felt a flicker of hope. But beneath that hope lurked a growing sense of fear. If what the man said was true, Ryan was in deeper trouble than he ever imagined, and the people pulling the strings wouldn't hesitate to silence him if he got too close to the truth. Elena Martinez walked into Joe's diner the next morning, her disguise carefully crafted to blend in with the locals. She wore a denim jacket over a plain white shirt, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. A notepad and pen were tucked under her arm, completing her look as a freelance journalist. Her mission was clear: gather information about the Iron Claw and its operations while maintaining her cover. The diner was quiet, save for the hum of an old jukebox playing in the corner. Elena took a seat at the counter and ordered a cup of coffee. As she waited, she scanned the room, observing the handful of patrons scattered around. Most were regulars, truck drivers, construction workers, and a few elderly couples sharing breakfast. But one man caught her attention. He sat alone in a booth near the window, his face pale and drawn. It was Ryan Carter. Elena's stomach tightened. She hadn't expected to see him here, especially not so soon after their encounter at the warehouse. For a moment she considered leaving, but curiosity got the better of her. She needed to know what he was doing in a place like this, and whether he posed a threat to her operation. Ryan barely noticed her. His eyes were fixed on a folder spread out on the table in front of him. Pages of documents, photographs, and handwritten notes lay scattered across the surface. He flipped through them absently, his expression a mix of anger and confusion. Whatever he was reading had clearly shaken him. Elena decided to take a calculated risk. Grabbing her notepad, she approached his booth. "Mind if I sit?" she asked casually, her tone friendly but neutral. Ryan looked up, startled. When he recognized her, his jaw clenched. "What are you doing here?" he growled. "Relax," Elena said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I'm just grabbing some coffee. Didn't expect to run into you." Ryan glared at her, his hand instinctively reaching for the folder. He pulled it closer, shielding it from view. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered. "It's not safe." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Not safe? Why? Because of you?" "No," Ryan snapped. "Because of people like you." "People like me?" Elena echoed, feigning confusion. "What does that mean?" Ryan hesitated, unsure how much to say. The documents in front of him painted a disturbing picture. They revealed Chief Gregory, Miller's ties to the Iron Claw, including evidence of bribes, illegal transactions, and even murder. Someone, likely one of Miller's enemies, had leaked the information to him, hoping he'd use it to bring Miller down. But Ryan wasn't sure who to trust anymore. And now, sitting across from the woman he'd once pointed a gun at, he felt more conflicted than ever. "You don't understand," Ryan said finally. "This goes way beyond you or me. There are dangerous people involved." Elena leaned forward slightly, her voice softening. "Then tell me. Maybe I can help." Ryan laughed bitterly. "Help? You're the reason I'm in this mess." "I didn't ask for any of this," Elena replied calmly. "But I'm here now, and if there's something bigger going on, maybe we can work together." For a moment, Ryan considered her offer. He didn't trust her, not completely, but he couldn't deny that she might be useful. After all, she seemed to have a knack for uncovering secrets. If anyone could make sense of the chaos surrounding him, it was her. Fine, Ryan said reluctantly, but not here. We'll talk somewhere private. Later that afternoon, they met at a secluded park on the edge of town. The area was deserted, giving them privacy to discuss what Ryan had discovered. Sitting on a weathered bench beneath a grove of trees, Ryan handed Elena the folder. "Take a look," he said. "It's everything I know." Elena opened the folder and began flipping through the pages. Her eyes widened as she absorbed the details. The evidence was damning, implicating not only Miller but also several high-ranking members of the Iron Claw. It confirmed her suspicions. The arms deal she was investigating was part of a larger network of corruption and crime. "This is impressive," Elena admitted, looking up at Ryan. "Where did you get this?" "I don't know," Ryan admitted. "Some guy gave it to me last night, said Miller set me up." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "That makes sense. They probably wanted to keep you quiet or distract you from the bigger picture." "But why me?" Ryan asked. "Why involve me at all?" "Because they knew you'd react exactly as you did," Elena explained. "Your reputation, your biases, they used them to their advantage. You were the perfect scapegoat." Ryan slumped back against the bench, rubbing his temples. "So what do we do now?" "We expose them," Elena said firmly. "All of them. Miller, the Iron Claw, everyone." "How?" Ryan asked skeptically. "Even if we go public, they'll just deny it. Or worse, come after us." "We don't go public," Elena replied. "At least not yet. First, we need proof. Something undeniable." Ryan frowned. "Like what?" "A confession," Elena said. "If we can get Miller or one of his associates to admit their involvement, we'll have leverage." "And how do you plan to do that?" Ryan asked. Elena smiled faintly. "Leave that to me." Back at Langley, Elena briefed Daniel Cruz on her meeting with Ryan. She showed him the documents and outlined her plan. "We'll use Ryan as bait," she explained. "He'll set up a meeting with Miller pretending he wants to cut a deal. In the meantime, we'll record everything." Daniel frowned. "Are you sure about this? Bringing him in could backfire." "I know it's risky," Elena admitted. "But we don't have time to wait. The arms deal is happening soon, and we need to act fast." Daniel sighed, but eventually nodded. "All right, just be careful. If Miller suspects anything—" "He won't," Elena interrupted. "Not if we play our cards right." The next day, Ryan called Miller, arranging a private meeting under the guise of seeking advice. "I need your help," Ryan said, his voice trembling with forced vulnerability. "Things are spiraling out of control, and I don't know what to do." Miller agreed to meet him at an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town. It was a location far enough from prying eyes to ensure privacy, but close enough for Elena and Daniel to monitor. As Ryan arrived, Miller stepped out of his car, his expression unreadable. "What's this about?" he asked gruffly. "I found something," Ryan said, holding up the folder. "Something bad about you." Miller's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Ryan hesitated, then handed over the folder. "Look for yourself." Miller flipped through the pages, his face growing paler with each passing second. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "That's not important," Ryan replied. "What matters is what happens next." Miller slammed the folder shut, his temper flaring. "You stupid idiot, do you have any idea what you've done?" "I haven't done anything yet," Ryan shot back. "But unless you give me answers, I'll make sure everyone sees this." Miller stared at him, weighing his options. Finally, he sighed. "All right, what do you want?" "To know the truth," Ryan said. "Everything, who you're working with, what they're planning, all of it." Miller glanced around nervously before speaking. "Fine, but not here. Somewhere secure." As Miller led Ryan to his car, Elena and Daniel listened intently through hidden microphones planted on Ryan earlier. Every word was recorded, every detail captured. By the end of the conversation, they had everything they needed. When the meeting ended, Ryan returned to the park where Elena was waiting. "Did it work?" he asked anxiously. "It worked," Elena confirmed, a satisfied smile spreading across her face. Now we have him. Ryan exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. But, as he looked at Elena, he realized their fight was far from over. Exposing Miller was just the beginning. Ahead lay a web of corruption deeper and darker than either of them could have imagined. The plan was set into motion. Elena Martinez and Daniel Cruz worked tirelessly to prepare for the final phase of their operation. Armed with the confession they had recorded from Chief Gregory Miller, they began coordinating with Director Allen Hayes to bring down not only Miller but also the Iron Claw Syndicate. The stakes were higher than ever, and every step carried the risk of exposure. Elena knew that simply having evidence wasn't enough. To dismantle the entire network, they needed to catch the leaders of the Iron Claw in action, preferably during the arms deal scheduled to take place in 2 days. This required precision, timing, and a lot of luck. Elena's role would be critical. She would pose as a buyer interested in purchasing weapons from the syndicate, gaining access to their inner circle while Daniel monitored her movements remotely. Meanwhile, Ryan Carter found himself caught between two worlds. On one hand, he felt a sense of vindication, knowing he had helped expose Miller's corruption. On the other hand, he couldn't shake the fear that his involvement made him a target. The Iron Claw didn't forgive easily, and once they discovered what he had done, there would be no turning back. Still, he agreed to cooperate with Elena, believing it was his only chance at redemption. The night before the arms deal, Elena met with Ryan in a secluded alley near downtown Oak Ridge. She wore dark clothing and carried a small backpack containing gadgets provided by Daniel. Her demeanor was calm but focused, radiating confidence despite the danger ahead. "You ready for this?" Elena asked, glancing at Ryan. "As ready as I'll ever be," Ryan replied, though his voice betrayed a hint of nervousness. "Just tell me what I need to do." "You stay out of sight," Elena instructed firmly. "If anything goes wrong, you run. Don't try to play hero." Ryan nodded reluctantly. He wanted to argue, to insist he could help more actively, but deep down he knew she was right. He wasn't trained for situations like this. All he could do was follow orders and hope for the best. Elena handed him a small earpiece. "Keep this on. You'll hear everything that happens. If things get bad, Daniel will guide you out." Ryan took the device and placed it in his ear. "What about you? How are you going to pull this off?" "I've done it before," Elena said with a slight smile. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Before Ryan could respond, a car pulled up to the curb. It was Daniel, who leaned out the window and called softly, "Time to go." Elena gave Ryan one last nod before climbing into the passenger seat. As the car sped away, Ryan watched them disappear into the darkness, feeling both relieved and uneasy. The next evening, the abandoned warehouse where Elena had first encountered Ryan served as the meeting point for the arms deal. The Iron Claw had chosen the location for its isolation, ensuring minimal interference. Inside, dim fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. Crates filled with weapons lined the walls, their contents gleaming ominously under the faint glow. Elena arrived alone, dressed as a wealthy buyer looking to expand her arsenal. She carried herself with authority, her sharp gaze taking in every detail of the room. A group of men stood near the center, their faces hardened by years of crime. Among them was Victor Kane, the ruthless leader of the Iron Claw. Tall and broad-shouldered, Kane exuded an aura of menace, his piercing eyes scanning Elena skeptically. "You're late," Kane growled, crossing his arms. "My apologies," Elena said smoothly, her tone polite but firm. Traffic was heavier than expected. Kane studied her for a moment before nodding toward one of his associates. "Show her the goods." One of the men opened a crate, revealing rows of high-powered rifles and ammunition. Elena inspected the weapons carefully, pretending to evaluate their quality. In reality, she was buying time, waiting for the signal from Daniel that the authorities were in position. "You seem knowledgeable," Kane remarked, his voice laced with suspicion. "Who sent you?" "No one," Elena replied casually. "I work alone." Kane smirked. "Everyone works for someone, even you." Before Elena could respond, the sound of distant sirens broke the silence. Panic rippled through the room as the members of the Iron Claw exchanged alarmed glances. Someone shouted, "We've been set up!" Chaos erupted instantly. Men scrambled to grab weapons, firing blindly toward the entrance as police cars surrounded the building. SWAT teams stormed in, shouting commands and subduing anyone who resisted. Elena ducked behind a stack of crates, her heart pounding as bullets whizzed past her head. Through the commotion, she spotted Kane attempting to flee through a side door. Without hesitation, she sprinted after him, determined not to let him escape. The chase led outside, where Kane jumped into a waiting van and sped off. Elena cursed under her breath but quickly relayed the vehicle's description to Daniel via her earpiece. "Got it." Daniel's voice crackled in response. "Backup's en route." Back inside the warehouse, Ryan listened intently to the unfolding drama. When he heard Elena mention Kane's escape, he sprang into action, ignoring her earlier instructions. Grabbing a nearby patrol car, he raced toward the highway, hoping to intercept the van. By the time Ryan reached the main road, the van was already several blocks ahead. He pushed the accelerator to the floor, weaving through traffic as adrenaline coursed through his veins. Up ahead, the van swerved erratically, trying to lose pursuit. Suddenly it skidded to a stop near an overpass, and Kane leaped out, brandishing a pistol. Ryan slammed on the brakes, jumping out of the car just as Kane fired a shot. The bullet missed narrowly, ricocheting off the pavement. Ryan dove behind, the hood of the car returning fire instinctively. His hands shook, but years of training kicked in, steadying his aim. Kane advanced cautiously, using the cover of nearby vehicles to shield himself. "You're making a big mistake," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "This ends now," Ryan shouted back, his resolve hardening. Before either man could act further, headlights illuminated the scene as multiple police cars converged on the area. Officers poured out, surrounding Kane and disarming him within seconds. Ryan lowered, his weapon breathing heavily as relief washed over him. Moments later, Elena arrived, her expression a mix of frustration and gratitude. "I told you to stay out of sight," she said sharply, though there was no real anger in her voice. "I couldn't just sit there," Ryan replied defensively. "Besides, looks like I saved your guy." Elena sighed but nodded. "Let's call it even." As paramedics tended to the wounded and officers secured the scene, Elena approached Kane, who was being handcuffed and loaded into a squad car. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw the hatred burning in his gaze. But she also saw something else: fear. Fear of the justice awaiting him, and of the truth coming to light. With Kane arrested and the remaining members of the Iron Claw rounded up, the operation was officially a success. Evidence gathered from the warehouse confirmed Miller's involvement, leading to his immediate arrest. News outlets reported the takedown extensively, praising law enforcement for dismantling one of the largest criminal organizations in the region. But for Elena, the victory felt bittersweet. While the mission was complete, she couldn't ignore the toll it had taken, not just on her but on everyone involved. Ryan especially had changed. Once consumed by anger and prejudice, he now seemed humbled, almost remorseful. Whether that change would last remained to be seen. As dawn broke over Oak Ridge, Elena stood outside the warehouse watching as cleanup crews hauled away the remnants of the night's events. Beside her, Ryan lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly as he stared at the horizon. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "For you?" Elena replied. "That's up to you. But for me, it's back to work." Ryan nodded, understanding the weight of her words. For the first time in a long time, he felt a glimmer of hope, not just for himself but for the possibility of change. The aftermath of the operation left Oak Ridge in a state of shock and reflection. The arrest of Chief Gregory Miller and the takedown of the Iron Claw dominated headlines for weeks. Residents who had once trusted their local police department now questioned how deeply corruption had rooted itself within the system. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, demanding accountability and reforms. For many, the event served as a wake-up call, a reminder that even those sworn to protect could betray the public's trust. Elena Martinez returned to Langley after the mission, her mind heavy with mixed emotions. On paper, the operation was a success. Victor Kane and his syndicate were behind bars, their illegal activities exposed and dismantled. Evidence against Miller ensured he would face justice for his role in enabling the Iron Claw's crimes. But Elena couldn't shake the eye, feeling that this victory was only temporary. Corruption wasn't confined to one town or one group of people. It was a pervasive issue, woven into the fabric of institutions across the country. As much as she wanted to believe they had made a difference, she knew there would always be another syndicate, another Miller, another Ryan Carter waiting in the shadows. At CIA headquarters, Director Alan Hayes called Elena into his office to debrief her on the mission. He sat behind his desk, his expression calm but thoughtful. "You did good work out there," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But I need to know, are you okay?" Elena hesitated before answering. She had faced countless dangerous missions before, but something about this one felt different. Maybe it was Ryan's transformation or lack thereof, or perhaps it was the realization that no matter how many criminals they arrested, the system itself remained broken. "I'm fine," she replied finally, though her tone suggested otherwise. Hayes studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Take some time off if you need it. You've earned it." "Thank you," Elena said softly. "But I think I'd rather stay busy. If I stop moving, I might start thinking too much." Hayes smiled faintly. "Understood. Just remember, this job doesn't define you. Don't lose sight of who you are." Elena left the office with those words lingering in her mind. Who was she really? A dedicated operative committed to fighting injustice? Or someone who had become so consumed by the fight that she risked losing herself in the process? She didn't have an answer, not yet, but she resolved to keep searching. Meanwhile, Ryan Carter found himself grappling with his own identity. Suspended from the force pending further investigation, he spent his days reflecting on everything that had happened. His actions at the warehouse had cost him his career and nearly his life. But they had also forced him to confront truths he had long ignored. Prejudice wasn't just a personal failing, it was a weapon used by those in power to maintain control. People like Miller had exploited his biases, turning him into a pawn in their game. And while Ryan couldn't undo the harm he had caused, he could choose how to move forward. One afternoon, Ryan visited the community center where protests against police misconduct had been organized. He stood at the edge of the crowd listening as speakers shared stories of discrimination and abuse. Some recounted harrowing encounters with officers like him, while others called for systemic changes to prevent future injustices. Ryan felt a pang of guilt but also a flicker of hope. These voices weren't filled with hate, they were filled with determination. Determination to create a better world, even if it meant starting small. After the event ended, Ryan approached one of the organizers, a young woman named Lisa. "Hi," he said awkwardly, extending his hand. "I'm Ryan Carter." Lisa eyed him warily but shook his hand. "What do you want?" "To help," Ryan replied. "I know I messed up, big time, but I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Lisa studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, we could use all the help we can get." Over the following weeks, Ryan threw himself into volunteer work, assisting with outreach programs and speaking at community meetings about his experiences. It wasn't easy. Many people still distrusted him and some outright rejected his attempts to contribute. But Ryan didn't give up. Slowly, he began earning their respect, not because of what he had done, but because of what he was trying to become. Back at Langley, Elena crossed paths with Daniel Cruz during a routine briefing. They exchanged updates on ongoing operations, their conversation light and professional. But as they walked together down the hallway afterward, Daniel broke the silence. "So," he said casually, "what's next for you?" Elena shrugged. "More missions, I guess, same old, same old." Daniel smirked. "You say that like it's nothing. Most people would be burned out by now." "Maybe I am," Elena admitted. "But what else is there? This is what I'm good at. There's more to life than being good at something, Daniel replied gently. Don't forget to live it while you're saving the world. Elena chuckled, though his words hit closer to home than she cared to admit. Thanks for the advice. I'll try to remember that. As they parted ways, Elena found herself thinking about Ryan. Despite everything, she respected the effort he was making to change. It wasn't perfect and it wouldn't erase the past, but it was a step in the right direction. Maybe that was enough, for both of them. Months passed and life in Oak Ridge slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be. The scandal surrounding Miller and the Iron Claw led to sweeping reforms within the police department, including new training programs aimed at addressing bias and improving community relations. While skepticism remained, there was a growing sense of optimism among residents that real change was possible. For Elena, the mission became a distant memory, filed away alongside countless others, yet every now and then, she would catch snippets of news about Ryan's efforts in the community. Each update brought a small smile to her face, a reminder that even in a world riddled with darkness, light could still find its way through. One evening, as Elena stood on the rooftop of her apartment building watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, she allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The fight against injustice would never truly end, but neither would the resilience of those willing to stand up and push back. And in that knowledge, she found solace. Below, in the bustling streets of Arlington, Ryan walked home from another day of volunteering, his steps lighter than they had been in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time he felt ready to face it, not as a man defined by his mistakes, but as someone striving to do better. In their own ways, both Elena and Ryan had emerged stronger from the storm. The scars remained, but so did the lessons learned. And as long as they kept moving forward, there was hope, not just for themselves, but for everyone counting on them to lead the way.